So what's really interesting is sitting down and thinking about this. I wasn't the buyer that necessarily needed to like create the plan or get started from zero, but I was the buyer that needed to have that mental shift happen where I felt ready to let go of that savings or to, was ready to shift my perspective on how I looked at that savings.
It was kind of a big risk for you. You felt like it was more of a risk to buy a house.
Yeah, it felt nerve-wracking to part with the dollars in my savings account, which is now that's something that I get to kind of talk other people through, right? Because I finally got to a point where it was like, well, it's not serving me if it's just sitting in my savings account. And I was watching other friends take risks and make investments. I don't have any stats to back this up, but I want to say men often too are probably more risk-taking when it comes to wealth building and kind of, taking...
I'll raise my hand to that.
Taking risks like that. So it kind of got to a point where I had like FOMO. I was like, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and keep watching my friends build wealth, or I'm going to have to like do something scary and get into a property.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 33 of the Realized Gains podcast. I'm Stephen Tran. I'm a multifamily and short-term rental investor.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee. I invest in single-family homes, and I'm a mortgage lender based in Portland and licensed in about 7 states.
Yeah, and Jordan, who did we interview today?
Oh yeah, we had a great interview today with Ashley Contreras, who's a realtor here based in Salem. She's been in the business for about 7 years, and she's very active with the local real estate association MVAR here, as well as the Oregon Association of Realtors.
Yeah, it was really great seeing how she's kind of built her business, starting from working retail at Trader Joe's to being a realtor for the last 7 years.
Yeah, she had a lot of great stories about the transition there, and also about how she moved from buying her first home after some hesitancy, and then converting that into a rental when she bought her next primary.
Yeah, I mean the first one's always the hardest.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you want to learn about buying and getting your first investment, this is the podcast for you.
Hey guys, welcome to the Realized Gains podcast. I'm Stephen Tran.
And I'm your co-host, Jordan Lee, and we're here with Ashley Contreras.
What's up? Ashley Contreras with Windermere Heritage.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show, Ashley. Do you mind just giving us a quick introduction? Tell us about your story, where you came from, and how you got where you are today.
Yeah. So I'm a realtor in Salem, Oregon. I've been licensed for 7 years this month.
Congratulations!
Past the hump.
Takes 7 years to get past the hump.
I have been in Oregon for 10 years, just over 10 years, so that feels pretty cool. I'm originally from Southern California. I came up here when I was looking to kind of get more established and put down some roots. Had a bit more of an affordable lifestyle up here after visiting. So I've been helping people buy and sell in the Willamette Valley.
And what were you doing before real estate?
So my background is retail, actually.
Okay.
I worked for Trader Joe's for 11 years.
Oh, nice.
And actually worked there in Southern California at that job and was able to move up doing that job. So that was kind of nice because the cost of living, pay kind of transferred. And honestly, like retail and a job like Trader Joe's taught me a lot about how to treat people, like how to build relationships. Trader Joe's encourages employees to be authentic. To try to like treat people how you want to be treated. You see somebody having a bad day, give them some flowers, walk them out to their car.
Yeah.
So I think I learned a lot about business actually working in retail, connecting with people of all walks of life, all age ranges. A lot of that transferred.
I noticed that at Trader Joe's, I have like some of the best conversations with the cashiers there.
Yeah.
Oh, they're super friendly.
Everyone's like very happy at Trader Joe's, I feel like.
Yeah, it's a little creepy, a little culty. But it's about, it's really about like the workplace that they kind of manifest. And so I think that's added a lot, like kind of given me a lot of ideas about how I want to treat people in my business.
Okay. And when you came up here and you were working at Trader Joe's, what kind of got you in that transition to get into real estate?
So it's funny. My ex mother-in-law actually, since the moment I moved up here, my ex mother-in-law was like, "You guys need to buy a house. You need to buy a house. You need to buy a house." So that was 2012, and I wasn't ready.
Oh, yeah, perfect timing.
It was good timing, right? Mm-hmm. But I wasn't ready. I mean, at the time I was a 24-year-old. And so, getting ready for this podcast, I was kind of reflecting on that. I wasn't ready. I didn't see the value in owning property. I have always been a saver.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of not having like the down to do it.
So you actually had a down payment saved, but you still felt like you weren't ready.
Which is funny because like that's
Interesting.
what I was
Yeah.
reflecting on today. Is that we kind of encounter different types of buyers, and so looking at myself as that baby buyer back before I knew anything about real estate, it's interesting to kind of reflect back and see that I was financially in a good position to do it, but mentally like took me a while to feel ready.
Can I ask, what did you save for? Like, what was your preconceptions of what I needed to save for a down payment?
So that's funny that you asked that too, because I was reflecting. I was like, I have always been a saver. So it wasn't anything that I had like shifted to prepare for. So I was kind of thinking about that too. We meet these people who come to us who kind of, we get the privilege of sort of helping them adjust and create a plan. But I was kind of the opposite, where I've always pinched my pennies. So growing up, if I got like a birthday card with $100 in it, I would shove it away.
Yeah.
Or like if I got like my student loans and they were extra, I would save that extra couple thousand and put it in my savings. And so
Interesting. Was there like a rule that you followed, or like X%, or was it just whatever felt right?
No.
And is that like something that your parents taught you to do, or you just felt that it was right?
Yeah, I mean, if we could be super honest here, I will say like insecurity in my upbringing, like, just stuff going on around the house. The way that I responded to that was I want to create my own sense of security.
You had a backup plan.
Yeah, and so honestly, it's been a little bit of a coping mechanism to like stress, but it's really worked for me because because of where I've ended up. So I unfortunately can't say that it's like something maybe someone else could like copy and recreate because I have a plan for it, but it's just kind of the way that I responded to stress factors was, I want to feel secure and be able to take care of things. So that's kind of always been my relationship with saving.
Super smart, yeah.
Yeah. So just
Wait, did we get to the percent?
no. So the answer to your question is I haven't really ever had like a plan or like I need to save this amount. It's just always been like when I have extra, it gets put aside, and my brain just doesn't work in that like, oh, extra, spend it.
It wasn't like I need to put this amount into a 401k or an IRA so I can have this amount when I retire. It's just like whatever extra I'm going to put here and save it for
since
rainy
I was
day.
young. Yeah. Okay. And now I am more strategic, and now I do have a financial planner and a CPA, and I do have those conversations about where I need to be. But when I was younger and starting out, I mean, it was always just for a rainy day. So what's really interesting is sitting down and thinking about this. I wasn't the buyer that necessarily needed to like create the plan or get started from zero, but I was the buyer that needed to have that mental shift happen where I felt ready to let go of that savings or to, was ready to shift my perspective on how I looked at that savings.
It was kind of a big risk for you. You felt like it was more of a risk to buy a house.
Yeah, it felt nerve-wracking to part with the dollars in my savings account, which now that's something that I get to kind of talk other people through, right? Because I finally got to a point where it was like, well, it's not serving me if it's just sitting in my savings account. And I was watching other friends take risks and make investments. I don't have any stats to back this up, but I want to say men often too are probably more risk-taking when it comes to wealth building and kind of taking,
I'll raise my hand to that.
taking risks like that. So it kind of got to a point where I had like FOMO. I was like, I'm going to sit on the sidelines and keep watching my friends build wealth, or I'm going to have to like do something scary and get into a property. And not even scary, because I had the back, it was just about shifting my perspective and kind of going into like an abundance mindset, right? Where like, this is going to be prosperous for me to make this decision. This is going to, for the bigger picture in the future versus the right now. It was kind of like that's what I had to go through.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about appetite for risk, because I don't know if you've been seeing the stats recently, but now like single women are kind of like leading the home buyer in terms of single folks. And so I thought, 'cause it's changed a lot from the past. And maybe part of that is because people don't anymore see real estate as risky as, when we were getting out of college and the real estate market was crashing, right? It seemed like a major risk because 2008, 2009, everyone lost a ton. So that's an interesting point you make.
Yeah, and I think it's cool now to sort of be able to read that in people. Because, sometimes we get that borrower that's really well qualified, that buyer that's really ready, but they're nervous or maybe they have a sweet rent, like set rent right now, that they're afraid to break up with. So it's kind of hard sometimes to get them to really appreciate that bigger picture. But it is something I try to do because I don't want to see people miss out, especially those that are ready. Like I've watched that happen, where they were qualified. They could have done it a couple years ago, but they were too nervous to sort of jump. And now they've just watched home prices literally go up by like $100,000. And it's become a lot less feasible for them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I totally agree with the whole, my family, we grew up very poor. So I also had that scarcity mindset. And I mean, if you were to ask me before my family had like kind of a financial emergency where I had to buy them a home, I would have been just as hesitant with probably 50% down, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, no, I totally understand like that mindset. So
Yeah. And I mean, it's like you're not really doing yourself a service, I think, in that big picture if you don't finally get to that jumping point because, what was the point of all that saving if I'm not going to put it to work for me?
I mean, you can go make that sweet 3.5% from, your high yield savings account.
Yeah, there you go. But I was just sitting on a regular savings account seeing like 3 cents a month, gains.
And so mom was telling you to do this in 2012. At what point was it her that just kept pressing it and eventually convinced you, or at what point did it?
Yeah, mom was influencing, and finally after a couple years of renting and seeing, I think, a couple coworker friends, because 2012 Trader Joe's wage people could afford houses left and right. So, kind of getting more comfortable, seeing a couple of friends take it on, finally felt ready. And, running the numbers, it wasn't as at 10 years ago home pricing 3% down and closing costs, even if you had to cover them, was still I think I got into the door of my house with about $10,000 total cash out of pocket.
Wow, that's crazy. What price did you purchase that then? Do you remember?
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I do want to know.
It was a $172,000 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in South Salem.
Wow.
Just under 1,300 square feet.
And that was like kind of the standard going rate for a 3.2 then.
It was, yeah. And I mean, again, like spending some time this morning thinking about my journey and why things have worked out the way they have. The property that we ended up writing on was recently flipped. And so that was kind of a selling point for us as coming out from an apartment into being first-time homeowners. We did like the appeal of something that was kind of recently redone. Although, hindsight, now that I know some stuff, I could tell you like it wasn't the best work or, definitely like the cheapest everything.
Yeah.
But still, like those first time buyers getting into something, it was nice peace of mind for us to know that it had new roof, new siding, new drywall, new plumbing, new electrical, so even still to this day, that property really hasn't cost me a ton.
You haven't had to go in and do a bunch of major repairs.
No.
Perfect.
Yeah. Just fun stuff, paint, the landscaping, that kind of stuff.
I mean, were you having a hard transition at the time with, basically how much you were paying for rent versus switching over to a mortgage, or was it like comparable at that time?
It wasn't too bad. I think at the time we could, again, prices, it breaks my heart a little to revisit because I know people these days struggle. But, at the time we were running a 1-bedroom apartment for under $700 a month, and our mortgage was right around $1,000.
Okay.
And still is. So, on that first property. So $1,000 didn't feel that bad. It's all okay.
It's hard to do that comparison now for a lot of
it really is.
A lot of my clients, especially when I push them to Jordan and tell them,
say,
figure out the numbers.
Rent has gone up a lot for sure,
definitely.
But unfortunately, with higher mortgage rates and higher prices, it's not quite the same ratios that we're looking at anymore as it used to be. Because look, I wonder what the rents are in that similar apartment situation now. I mean, do you have a rough idea?
I mean, I would guess 12 or 13, probably easily.
Okay, so maybe they've doubled, but then mortgage payment is almost tripled.
Sure.
At that, close to it. I mean, because that home, what do you estimate the value is ballpark now?
$375.
Oh, $375. Okay, so probably not quite tripled. Yeah, definitely
doubled.
Not quite, yeah.
But I do have that
2.5.
home,
Yeah.
I have that home rented for $2,100.
Okay, so there you go.
And I think I could sell it for $375 if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a solid like $1,100 a month cash flow minus utilities.
You
said $1,000 payment.
So my mortgage is like 1,100 and I have it rented for 21. After paying property manager, I cash flow, like 700 or 800 a month on it. And so something else I've been thinking about, is when we talk to our clients about these, like, entertaining if they want to sell their property that they own or if they should go the renting it out route. Something I've noticed in having these conversations with people is they kind of need help sometimes, I think, deciding on like what the picture looks like. So sometimes people are really focused on that cash flow, which matters, if that's where they're at, if that's where they're tight, and if that's kind of what the benefit is to them. But I'm noticing myself right now reminding people when they're entertaining like selling versus renting out a property that they own, that people seem to forget like the equity picture and like the big picture, right? And so like my property, not only am I cash flowing on, but I'm also reserving the $200,000 in equity that I have there.
Yeah, you have options
by having those tenants in it, and that equity is continuing to build along with those monthly, the cash flow monthly. And I think sometimes like people who are newer to the idea only focus on one or the other and kind of forget that like both are working for you.
Yeah, and there's the whole point where your loan's getting paid down too. So I mean, eventually you won't have a loan on there. That's another type of savings too, right? That equity savings. So now it's different than a liquid, checking and savings account where you have the money ready to go. But you have options, right? You could sell, you could get a HELOC, you could do cash out refinance, you could trade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea if you live in it 2 of the past 5 years, you can sell if it's your primary, for basically tax free up to $250,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of good options.
Lots of, that's the point, right? With real estate is now you have options.
Well, and it's kind of funny too, right? Because I avoided parting with savings for a certain amount of time, being nervous about it. But it's like once you do it and kind of get a couple years into it, it's like now I have even more peace of mind and security because of the equity that I have in that property, because of the potential I have to leverage that for me if I got into an emergency or, decided I wanted to jump on another investment. Exponentially that peace of mind has just grown over time.
Yeah. No, and, we were talking about cash flow, and I know me and Jordan had, I don't want to put any names, but a client that was very focused on cash flow. And it's like, like cash flow can go away with one pipe, one burst pipe,
Yeah.
And equity, like, I think it's just a harder to access piggy bank. It's kind of how I see it. So,
Yeah, and in certain markets, like this one in particular is probably a better equity market than cash flow market.
Yeah.
Because, we do have clients that are like, well, what about the Midwest? And we always talk about, there's great cash flow there, but...
Yeah, like I said, the one
slower
major
equity
emergency
build
can ruin all that cash flow you have. Those properties are not growing very much in value, at all. So it's, for me, that's a tough proposition,
Sure.
So, and I think most people make their money, in equity, to be honest,
Yeah.
And so you bought the home where you hadn't started as a real estate agent at that point, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I was very new to real estate process, all of that stuff. Met my realtor because she was referred to me. She actually still works in this office with me.
Oh, nice.
And again, I was like 23, 24. So I just felt like a new little baby out in the world in general, and working with this woman who was in her 40s, who was, professional and kind of like would magically appear at a showing and then just, go off in her vehicle off to do other fancy real estate things. I honestly was like a little like mystified by her, and by kind of having that, coming from retail, I'm like working with this professional person. Who just sort of had this like mysterious career and lifestyle to me at the time. I've always been a like A student type, I like going for the A. And so toward the end of our transaction, she said, I haven't said this to anyone very often, but I've been a realtor for 13 years. And I was wondering if you'd ever thought about doing it. Because she's like, you've been really detailed, very diligent. I would like call the plumber.
Well, she straight up asked you afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and we know in like volunteer leadership that ask is really big sometimes, or in in kind of leveling up sometimes for us. It takes that ask of someone else to kind of point out something or maybe a strength that we have. So she asked me, and of course, because I'd been kind of like star-eyed looking at her the whole time. I was like, she thinks I might be good at this. But, I'd call a plumber to follow up on something, and I'd follow up, I'd send her a 2-paragraph email breaking down all the details. So she had just kind of seen how I had worked and how I was engaged in the transaction.
You seem very interested.
Yeah, and, was noting my file and stuff like that as a buyer. So I looked into it. It was, I had savings, so it was a reasonable like barrier cost of entry to get in. For me, it seemed like a worthwhile endeavor. I'm not gonna lie. If I had known how hard it was gonna be, I wouldn't have done it. Like, I'm really glad I was a little naive and was kind of like, study, get a license, do some stuff. Because
drive a nice car, show up at showings,
right,
and disappear.
Wear a blazer, it'll all work out. And so I had no idea, about what was involved in like building a business, building a sphere, transaction to transaction. There's just so much we can get wrong, and I really value doing things right for people, and I only want to do things when I'm feeling competent and like I could really serve people well. So I just got in my head a lot, being new and just feeling the weight of what we do. Like, I don't take that lightly, the responsibility that we have to serve people well. So yeah, I was pretty hard on myself in the beginning, but like I said in the beginning, it's nice to hit that 7-year point because I'm feeling more confident these
like
days.
I said, it takes 7 years to get ramped up. I'm on year 2 and I'm like, oh.
Just 5 more years. Just 5 more years.
I was going to ask, was there a point where you were just like, okay, I feel confident. I'm feeling like I'm ramping up. I can make a living off of this and move forward?
I've always been consistent, honestly. Like, I'm not a big producer, but I, from the beginning, like, have been consistent and haven't, had to squeak by, and I have always had my savings to fall back on, so I don't fall into these, like, fear moments in my business. I think for me, a lot of the work has just been on my mental, like, imposter syndrome, just beating myself up and being hard on myself, There's a lot to compare ourselves to in this industry with social media, and there's this kind of, like, everything can be tainted kind of with this, like, hustle culture.
Yeah.
You did that, so now what? What's next? And that's something that I've really had to kind of separate myself from a little bit in our industry, because that's just really not me. And that's something that's really nice to kind of come to peace with. And that's taken, again, like probably just this last year of business. Just kind of, client after client that I keep encountering are just awesome. We just work together so well. There's so much trust and just kind of community in the people that I do get to serve. And so just really enjoying that.
I think that's probably more basically your personal change, Like, I tend to think, oh my God, my clients are getting easier and easier. No, I think it's more of us getting better and better at what we do.
And I think as you get better, you kind of manifest what the ideal client that fits the culture of your business and like how you want to work. I really feel that lately, and that feels really cool.
Yeah, and I'll say too, obviously having your savings as a backup, like you said, not being stressed about your finances, that helps you be a true fiduciary. I know there's a lot of struggling realtors out there that do not have their clients' best interest at mind because they have to eat. So
thank you for saying that. And I think, I was talking to a gal at an open house this weekend, and she's like, now I know you're kind of biased because you're a realtor, but what kind of things should I be asking a realtor or be looking for in a realtor, And at the end of our conversation, I kind of told her, I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, we pretty much all have access to the same tools. We're going to look at the same MLS system to send you listings. I really think it comes down to just connecting with somebody who you feel seen by and who you really feel you can trust to kind of keep your best interest in mind, because so much of what we do as real estate professionals, lenders, and realtors, it just falls on good faith.
Yeah.
There's no one monitoring or policing us to do our jobs well. And so I really think you want to align yourself with somebody who you know is going to have your back and do the right thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. Like I said, there's, what is there, like 9,000 realtors in the Portland area? I don't know what it is.
In our local, we have 1,800. Just locally, yeah.
Yeah. So, did you make this transition to real estate like right after you bought? Were you just like, and the realtor told you and you're like, all right.
Pretty quickly. Yeah, I signed up pretty quickly. So I closed. I had my license within 6 months of closing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were pretty serious about it right away.
But then I don't think my first closing was for like 6 months after that. So my first closing was probably like close to a year after I bought my house.
And you stayed on part-time at? Okay.
Yeah, which was a nice way to be able to transition. I had benefits initially. Miss those.
Yeah, me too.
Had benefits initially, but then as my hours whittled down in retail, I had to let those go. And that was a big, again, like leap of faith to finally let go of my day job.
Right.
I could have done it for well before I actually did it, but I just kind of liked having my toe in the door. But there is something to be said, sometimes I think about just kind of cutting that cord, fully trusting yourself and kind of opening up that like room for, new energy. Yeah.
So when you made that transition, you mentioned you had savings. Was there like, were you, okay, this is a year's worth of savings, this is enough, or what? Because I remember I put a very arbitrary number at that. I had saved $10,000, which was like the most I'd ever had, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can make a career change now. Like I can go to a commission only job. Turns out, definitely wasn't enough. But like, what kind of made your decision in that part on savings?
I don't remember what the exact numbers looked like, but probably for me, like the comfort zone would have been probably around $10,000, like left over after the down and stuff. Because, we know like most systems on a home, a roof, especially 10 years ago, were going to be about $10,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what point did you decide, okay, I can leave my day job type thing?
Yeah. I was probably, I did that probably 3 years into my career. I only did that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, so I was kind of keeping it on.
So you kept it for a little bit, yeah.
And for lead generation too. Although now there's like 3 more realtors that work at that Trader Joe's. I was the first realtor that was part-time Trader Joe's employee. But since I left, there's like 3 more there. So they could have they could have the lead generation now. But that first year of business was probably majority Trader Joe's coworkers.
Really?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure.
Huh.
And now, and that's gone on to be like their mom, their family, their brother. I've helped, like that's definitely where my sphere kind of took off, is from my retail job.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And now you're loyal to that store for life, right?
I still say we when I'm like, when do we get this product in? When I shop there, it like will never. It's ingrained in me. I worked for that company from 18 to like 32, so a third of my life was in a Trader Joe's store.
Love it.
Yeah, it's part of my culture of a human.
So you're comfortable in the real estate world now. Mm-hmm. I know you're involved in a lot of like local organizations and leadership programs. Mm-hmm. What is your kind of, I guess your longer term, maybe 5 years? What is your goal? Are you you converted your first primary into a rental. Are you going to keep going down that path? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I want to own more property. So I bought my second house a year ago. It had been, I think, about 5 years since I had moved, which was very humbling. My first move was from a 1-bedroom apartment into a house. So that was my first house-to-house move, which was a friendly reminder of all the things our clients go through. I was grateful to kind of re-experience that. I want to own another house as soon as I can, but I also don't want to move again right now. That's kind of the balance.
You need like a couple of years to get over the trauma?
Yeah. Honestly, if it was just up to me, I'd probably move again in like a year, but my boyfriend has expressed interest in us kind of like waiting until he could be a financial partner in our next move and our next purchase, which I do value. I want it, if that, that's totally something we could work towards. So I appreciated kind of hearing that from him, and made me rethink like how the next one will look,
Yeah.
Yeah, financially I could probably do it sooner than that, but moving wise, to you guys know, but I would need to put 20% down if I wasn't planning to live in it, and so it's going to take me definitely more to get there.
So the game plan is just to continue buying primaries and moving forward that way?
I'd like to own at least a few. I don't know that I'll do that forever. I think if not the next house, the house after that, I'd like to be like, I call it my big girl house, where I could like hang out for a while. I'm still,
home.
My second property I bought last year was actually 1 minute away from my first home. It's a very similar, like 3.2 square footage wise and stuff. So it's still kind of that like starter entry level. But realistically, like I could be happy there for a long time.
Yeah.
This house did need everything, where my first house didn't. So there's a little bit of like, being a seasoned homeowner.
Yeah, what made you feel like you could take that on this time?
knowing I had the financial ability.
Yeah, just the savings and
being
cash
able
flow.
to value the bigger picture and being able to see like long term what this property had to offer. I think because of my eye as a real estate agent now, I was able to like walk this property and see all the potential that it had. And I knew that I could get it for a decent price. And so, and I know that I'm keeping it for a long time, you know, so I have dumped in a chunk of money in my first year of owning this home that if I had to turn around tomorrow and sell it, I wouldn't get back.
Right.
But you know, it's all the things that are going to make this property more valuable and like sustain its worth.
Yeah.
Like the roof has been done now, the furnace has been updated, we have AC. So, you know, it's all the good stuff. It's the stuff that holds value and the stuff that will make it a great rental at some point. So.
And I'm sure you have your list of contractors from your transactions over the years, right?
Yes, I mean.
Yeah, how was that experience for you? Because like we're often asked to give, you know, referrals for contractors, and
Yeah.
turns out when you're actually managing contractors, it's a different story, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to find people who are reliable and consistent. And yeah, fortunately, I do have a really awesome handyman, and that honestly does make a huge difference. It's very empowering to know right now that I do have a reliable contact that can come help with, you know, a new toilet or waterproofing some siding, and it makes a big difference to know that you have that connection.
Yeah, no, like I said, that is definitely key. I've definitely gone through my fair share of not great contractors. I will attest to that, and it definitely, you know, obviously adds to the cost, you know, adds to the timeline, which adds to holding costs, so it can be very painful.
I learned, you know, because this new property is the first where I've been hiring out work too. My first house, we painted the inside ourselves, and it was awful. I mean, the house looked like a tornado had hit it for like 3 weeks, and that just did not mesh with my anxiety very well. And so,
it was the job you did wasn't
No, the
awful.
job looked great.
It was just the process of doing
the
it.
process, like I had fully underestimated, as we do, that, you know, I was moving my entire house. Yeah, not outside of the house, but it was still all had to be touched and moved. And the help that I had, you know, not hired, it was like friends that I was paying. They could come help for 2 days, and then they couldn't come back for like 5 or 6 days. So I was the one stuck in the chaos the whole time.
You were just rolling everything,
crying,
painting the corners.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, so you know, so what's been different about this new property too is that like I've gotten to that point where I recognize, you know, that I can't, that it's just not going to happen if we try to do it ourselves, or, you know, it's just not possible, or it's not going to work for the timelines for getting moved out and getting tenants into the new place. And so this was also a learning curve on this one for like hiring people, you know, getting estimates. It's kind of interesting because there are things that like my clients I've been helping do for 7 years, but now I was doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And it's, not as straightforward as you'd think. Like 3 people show up to give you a bid, only 2 respond. And then one of the contractors like I chose for my interior paint, I was really disappointed with the quality of the work that they did, you know, so I super felt like I'd overpaid for something.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there are just things like that we're learning.
It's like,
curves.
do you want to fight them, or do you want to just like take care of it and not, you know,
and you're kind
burn
of
the
in
energy?
you're kind of in that crunch mode where you're like, you just have, you know, you have so many moving things that you just sort of had to like get to the finish line and get it, you know, so so there's been interesting kind of going through all that too, like sort of managing, like we had to try to have interior paint and some other like interior projects done, and it all had to sort of happen in certain ways. And
because you're living there, right?
we were trying to move in by a certain date. So it was like, you know, trying to get what was it, baseboards had to get put in before the painters could be, you know, and just kind of getting everything lined up. So
And they're all different handymen, right? Contractors.
Yeah, the handyman doesn't do painting.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was like, this had to be, you know.
There's an order of operations. I always go ceiling to floor. You know, it's a pain. Just trying to coordinate everybody and their availability and. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's been like the different. My first house was sort of set it and forget it. This house has been more like, okay, like prioritize and kind of plan and tackle. So it's kind of been interesting to like kind of prioritize and decide what to do when.
Do you have obviously a favorite between the two? Obviously, you know, you're adding a lot of value and equity by fixing up a home, and the first one's ready to go. Obviously, that's made a ton of equity just by sitting. But do you have a like a favorite or a game plan moving forward there?
Like which approach I would like better moving forward?
Yeah.
I think both has been cool to experience, honestly. What was cool about the first house is, like I said, the finishes were really cheap, and so over time it was rewarding to like update the the boob lights to like, you know, nice like LEDs and canned lighting, and it felt, as a new buyer, it didn't feel super intimidating because it was like all pretty
Stuff
fresh.
that you could take on.
And it was like, you know, take off and replace, like easy patching, you know, repairing stuff. So that was fun, like, and especially from that mentality of a new buyer with, you know, really, really new to homeownership, that was nice peace of mind. It kind of felt like moving into a fresh, clean apartment because it was just remodeled.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been comfortable doing what I'm doing now then, you know, taking on a house that needed like new toilets, new bathroom floors, you know, it's funny how adaptable we are. To our living spaces. Yeah. Like the first day I woke up in my new house, I definitely cried. I was like just tripping over boxes, couldn't find any of my stuff, like couldn't find, you know, my stuff to get ready. And just, I really felt like I wanted to go home to my other house. And then, you know, like you settle in, you get used to it. Yeah. You put your stuff away, you start making it your own. Yeah. So it's been fun on this one to kind of be able to make it your own and kind of do things that we want to do over time. I wish I could do it all. That's kind of the hard part. Is like I want to do more, and technically I could afford to do more. It's just not smart to do more right now because I don't want to be over invested in this property either.
Yeah, no, totally. I totally understand that. Like obviously, like we still have a little bit of that scarcity mindset. You know? It doesn't really go away. You know?
Yeah. So it's a balance.
And so if you were to recommend to a first-time investor that was like thinking about doing something similar of what you did, what would you say to them, like to get them, you know, moving forward if they're having the block that you were having about, I've got the savings, but I don't know if I want to spend it, that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say try to connect with somebody in your local market who can help you sort of get a grasp on that bigger picture, to kind of explain like the trajectory of home values in your area over time. You know, I could speak to someone in our area about why a market crash isn't coming, why there's not going to be houses that are $162,000 again in South Salem. You know, so it is sort of like if the bottom is set on pricing, you know, and I think that's a misconception sometimes that we're going to see this upside down market come again at some point. And so that concerns me when I hear people stuck in that mindset, because this market that they're envisioning is likely to never come. So what are they waiting? You know, they're waiting for something that might never happen. You know, obviously saving money is going to be my recommendation, because for me, that's where I find my peace of mind in being a property owner and being a two-time property owner. Is I know that, you know, I could be a responsible landlord to my tenants, because if anything comes up, I can handle it and take care of it. I also, as a seasoned real estate professional, like have a great understanding of the lifespan of like where the systems in my properties are at. So I kind of mentally know like what things might come up for me. You know, so I kind of always have an idea of where those are at, and what we might need to take care of. I think that just kind of saving money and knowing the property, kind of knowing what to expect. You know, I think that's a big one.
And what do you think about the buying a new primary and converting your old primary into a rental? Is that you think that's a repeatable strategy? You think you would encourage other people to do that?
I mean, absolutely. It's you know, a lot of people that we talk to, right, like they never say, I wish I would have waited longer to buy a house. A lot of people are like, dang, wish I would have bought a house 10 years ago.
Yeah, me too.
And so right now is the 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Like in 10 years, this is the 10 years ago.
Yep.
So I think that's like a good point to think about. Yes, prices have gone up, and the, you know, market in our area has changed a lot. But it's going to keep doing that. It's going to keep changing, and likely prices are going to continue to keep going up. So I really think getting in as soon as you can is important. Again, talking with somebody, a professional, can help you prioritize and make a plan for what that looks like. I know some people might feel discouraged or like it's not realistic for them, but you really don't know unless you've kind of sat down and looked at what you can do with your finances. So I'd say like you at least owe it to yourself to have a conversation with somebody like Jordan who can help you like look at it, you know, and decide before you just close the book and decide it's not for you or not possible.
I mean, I saw today that the average Kelley Blue Book average car payment is $800.
Oh my God!
So
that's more than I was paying for my first apartment in Salem.
Right. I mean, if your mortgage payment's what, $2,500 or something like that. I mean, it's you maybe don't buy that $70,000 car, right?
Right. I mean, and again,
invest in your future.
What like wealth building, like looking at that big picture. What is it? Is it like the average homeowner sees 4 to 6% equity gain year over year.
I mean, the Case-Shiller index over the last 33 years is like 4.3% year over year. Yeah.
So I mean, that's not a bad return, on your investment.
That's just on the equity too, right?
Oh yeah.
That doesn't count rents.
I mean, I in this market with how high our mortgage payments are with the interest rates, I had to push patience with the people who want to buy the primary and then rent it out the next year and move to the next one, because it's probably unlikely that the rents are going to surpass that mortgage payment right away. But still, I mean, if you had to put a little bit into your mortgage, your tenant is paying probably most of your mortgage and adding to your principal, and you're adding also a little bit to your piggy bank. So
yep, you're growing in equity. Your rents will grow up, and your principal. Even though if you're not cash flowing, there's still a portion of that payment that's going to your principal.
Right.
You're paying yourself. So.
Exactly.
Right.
So I had to push that, like I said, long-term thinking in this type of market. So.
Yeah, and it's an appreciating asset, unlike your Escalade.
Right.
or just your F-150. It's now $70.
Your F-150 Raptor.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. I mean, we're definitely in this market. It's only responsible of us to remind consumers, that it is about the long game. Something that you buy today may not be rentable, like cash flow, for a couple years, depending on where you land. And so I try not to overpromise anybody that that's going to be like their picture 6 months from now.
Yeah, no, totally understand. And I think that is a great lesson for, like I said, a lot of people looking to buy their first home or their next investment. Not to have your expectations like crazy high for cash flow immediately.
Yeah.
Unless you're in I don't know, Iowa.
Right. Right. But I had a client come to my open house this weekend, so we were chatting, and he's kind of on the fence. He can buy now, but is sort of, figuring out where his job's going to land, figuring out what part of town he'd want to actually own in. And he is one of those people that has the savings to do it and has the income and the job. So I found myself speaking to him and kind of going through the same speech I'd been giving myself, that you've worked so hard to get to this point and to save this money. And at some point you've got to take that next step to really put that leap of faith, into homeownership. Because otherwise it's just sitting in your savings and it's not serving you,
Yep. Totally.
I understand. Well, Ashley, if people are trying to find you or trying to get a hold of you, what would be the best way they could do that? Social media, phone number, email, etc.?
Yeah, I am on social media, on Instagram. I do like to connect with people that way, but also please phone, email is great as well. In social media, I am at Ashley_PNW_realtor. And then my phone number is 503-559-5776. Call, text. You can find me online. I'm in Salem. I work the surrounding areas.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on the show. Learned a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, friends.
Yeah. Have a great day.
Cool.